Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is August 20th, 2024 at 4:30 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I move we adopt the agenda as published.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
there are no changes. I move that we adopt the consent agenda as published for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will go on to item 8, which is the Department Commission reports. If we could have, I don't know, it's gonna be Alex. Well, it's Public Works Fiscal Year 2025 Republic Services Annual Rate Adjustment for Solid Waste Collection Services. Good evening and afternoon, Alex.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. Thanks for giving me just a minute to introduce Republic Services FY25 rate proposal. We just wanted to kind of tee this up real quick for you guys. As a reminder for council, our solid waste franchise agreement with Republic Services allows for an annual contractual adjustment of 90% of CPI, Consumer Price Index, each year. This year, that happens to be 3.38%. When Republic Services runs their numbers, they sit down with us as staff, go through those numbers. They then present that information to your Solid Waste Advisory Commission, which has also been completed, ultimately bringing that information to you, which is where we're at tonight. So they're going to present to you here in just a moment, give you the information on the proposal. This is just an informational hearing. So I don't think we're asking for any official action items, although I think we are asking for some feedback and direction on how you feel about the proposal so that we know how to proceed forward in terms of proposing a resolution, public hearing, et cetera. So with that, I'll stop there. Unless you guys have any specific questions for me, I'll, with your permission, turn it over to Republic Services to give you their proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Cord, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Mayor. Appreciate your, excuse me, we appreciate the audience today, Mayor and Council. I think if we were here today simply to present the contractually agreed upon increase, then there wouldn't be a whole lot of a conversation, but we'll get to that in a minute. For those that I haven't met, my name is Cord Stanley. I'm the General Manager for Republic Services of Idaho. And this is Margaret, our Finance Manager for the same, and we truly appreciate the audience. Let's see, the presentation's pulled up. This presentation is going to really focus on what our ask is, right? The ask up and above what we're here to, or the contract, and that's to pay for a market labor adjustment for our drivers today. So before we get into it, are there any questions? Okay. So the bottom line of our ask is we are seeking an additional $390,000, or what it equates to be about 1.6% of the contract's service revenue. How we derive that $390,000 is we essentially took the contract revenue of our total business unit and took our market labor adjustment, what we think we needed, and then essentially assigned a percentage to that revenue. So let's say, for simple math, if the city of Meridian is 25% of our total revenue, then if we need $1.8 million for our market labor adjustment, then the ask was about $400,000 for the city of Meridian, or $450,000. So that's kind of the methodology behind it. $390,000 does not make us whole on our market labor adjustment. That's certainly us internalizing a significant portion of that. But $390,000 is our ask of the city. Right now, our starting wage is approximately $20 per hour for a driver. And we are trying to get our drivers up to roughly $24 per hour. For equivocal work by some of our competitors in the market, they start at $25 and $26 respectively for the major two. So they've significantly outpaced us on wages at this point. We pride ourselves on being cost controlled and saving our cities, a lot of money through the years while being financially responsible to our company. But at a certain point, we have to do the right thing and take care of our folks and get them to a more equitable wage for what the market truly demands at this point. What this, in essence, represents, that 1.6%, is 26 cents for a 95-gallon cart per month. So it's about a quarter per month for a residential customer. It's $1.37 for a 3-yard commercial customer once a week, and $4.60 for a roll-off haul. So I'm not saying an insignificant number by any stretch of the imagination, but it is 1.6%. And we'll frame that with a little more context here. So this is the CPI. This is how our rates are increased every year. So the full CPI of the garbage trash CPI index is 3.763%. Now we get 90% of that with 6% of our franchise fee remitted back out of that. Not all line items in the contract are eligible for CPI. So when you take all, like the total contract revenue and you actually apply what we get, the real number that our rates increase by, or the revenue of the total contract increases by, is 2.552% this year. So I think it's important just to frame when we say it's CPI based, it absolutely is, but it's a little bit less than I think what everybody thinks it is in general. It certainly was me, right? Because until we actually did the math and put pen to paper on this, I truly thought it was a little bit more than that. So these are our donations, and I frame this because we're members of this community. We want to be partners, right? We feel like we provide a tremendous amount of value to the city, and we truly appreciate everything that the city does for us. The original contract had 19 sites with donated services. And over the last approximately 10 years, that's grown to 36 donated sites. And I think the original intent of the contract was that donated services grow proportional to the contract's revenue. But this is a city of substance. This is from most perspectives, this is a premium city to live in, and the city offers a lot of services. And donated services to support the city have grown 400% in the same time frame, to the contract revenue growing 140%. So donated services has far outpaced the contract's revenue to support them at this point. So we're not asking for anything to be done about that. We're just framing that for reference on some of these items through the years and why it's tough to internalize our full ask. As members of this community and partners, there's also things that we do up and above the contract. So right now, annually, we provide approximately $173,000 of donated services, even up and above what's contractually obligated. So currently, Republic Services pays for all disposal on donated services. We pay for all the hauls from the transfer station and the recycle hauls, like people can drop off. We pay for those roll-off hauls to get to the MRF. And then the Hand in Hand, which is a separate recycle program for the community. So we do that in the spirit of partnership and have done that for years. This is a high-level summary by category. Truly, and being fully transparent, this is not my favorite slide. This is something that I think annually we provide. I'm going to give the council and mayor a minute to review this and see if you have any specific questions rather than going through this line by line. And if there's no other questions on this slide, we'll keep moving along. We're going to flip to the last. We're going to start, we have a couple appendix slides, and we're going to start with the very last one here first. These are example breakdowns of this year's ask, both what was contractually obligated and what we are asking for in addition to. This is the blended breakdown by service type. Now, these are obviously not all of our rates. These are samples of a commercial service, roll-off service, and a 95-gallon cart, but this is how it is all broken down. So essentially, our labor ask is 26 cents of our $1.03 increase year over year for a 95-gallon cart. So it's around 25% of that total ask.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
how are your volumes doing? Like I mean, your margins are getting squeezed a little bit, but I'm assuming that your volumes are going up with the amount of growth in the city. Like, help me contextualize the labor increase, because we did do an out of contract labor increase recently.
Mhm.
And when we start to see multiple requests like this in a row, it makes me start to think that something about our contract isn't really functioning well for this interest rate environment. But are you able to make up for your margins getting squeezed with volume? Are you finding efficiencies? How are you kind of dealing with it holistically?
So we let data kind of lead us to our conclusions, right? Volume is certainly looking great, right? The city is growing, the valley is growing, but those costs are usually incremental. And as they go up, the revenue of a contract typically supports that growth with the current margin, right? That's the structure of a contract. I think the purpose of kind of one of the earlier slides was to show that like what our actual reimbursement from the CPI index each year is. It's rather thin. It is to support the contract year in, year out. And I think we are totally willing to accept that and for as large of a contract this is and the stability of the work. And so we're okay with that. What does put strain on the contract is often a lot of these donated services growing disproportionate to the contract's revenue. So that's one of the first things that we kind of saw and identified. And to the point, like, I think our donated roll-off hauls were, I think, 980 to the city last year. So almost 1,000 roll-off hauls were donated. More so, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that our turnover is 42%. So it was not 42% last year. Okay. So last year, we actually gave a 9-cent deduction for our residents off their residential rate last year. So I don't know if that's something that was advertised or not, but we found some efficiencies from our transfer station. We're moving tons a little quicker from some infrastructure upgrades. So we gave the residents a 9-cent break. And as far as what was given previously from a market adjustment, it was 11 cents. So in spirit, we've essentially given the majority of that back already to the community. As far as who is this for, fun fact, and this is something that we weren't able to provide SWAC when they asked. When we were asked, I had to go back and do some research. 51 of our employees actually live in Meridian. 29 of them are drivers. It's only 31 routes, and I say only, it's a significant number. 31 routes support Meridian. So almost a 1-to-1 for the drivers that support Meridian live in Meridian. So when we're asking for this, in kind of in spirit, you're paying your own people.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
And I mean, I have I appreciated the financial model, being posted for this. I guess what wasn't clear to me from this though was like, how are whether you're measuring it in hauls or carts or some type of volume metric, but what is your total revenue in terms of bottom line to you? How much is your growth in your revenue from year to year?
I can't answer that just off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I got a little too close here, but I can't answer that off the top of my head, what our revenue growth is. It's typically between price increases and volume around 4%, 5%, right? So let's say if a contract allows for a 3%, price increase in a year, we know roughly population growth is 2% here, year in, year out. And so you can reasonably expect about a 2%, top line revenue growth from that. So, and we know price does the same, right? So you aggregate those together and it's 4 to 5%. But again, those are typically just to pay for current costs, and that scales with the volume, right? So we're talking about a roughly 20% increase in labor for this adjustment. That's the goal, is to pay our people basically 20% more.
Mhm.
And that's not covered by volume. That's not covered by an index.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I think where I'm struggling a little bit, I understand labor costs have gone up. Totally understand that. I understand inflation's happened. I understand all those things. I think where I'm struggling a little bit is you're asking us to do something that's out of contract. So, again, we've done that before, but I felt like that was pretty extraordinary. So you're asking us to do something out of contract, but I don't have the context for the profitability of your business.
Yeah, so I can
context-
talk about profitability.
Okay.
Getting into contract specifics is proprietary information. I can't talk about Meridian specifically. What I can say is that our company, our net profit as a company was roughly, I think it was was it 13% or 11? It was 11.6% actually in 2023. It was 11.6%. So in spirit, when a customer pays us $1, we make 11.6 cents on that, which in my opinion isn't unreasonable, right? That's our company average. I can't divulge proprietary information at the contract level, right? That just kind of aids our competitors. But what I will say is this market is a reflection of our greater company. In general, we make money, but we are not making money hand over fist by any stretch of the imagination. And when contracts get strained kind of beyond that, for this, that, and another reason, that's when we have to come hat in hand and ask for something.
Yeah. So the last time we considered a similar out of contract labor adjustment, I believe a member of the Public Works team, did kind of a comparables analysis of everything to make sure that we thought we were getting a good value for our contract. So in light of that request to go out of contract, I will be looking for a similar analysis to be done so that I could feel confident that we're still getting a good value. And I think we are, and we recently did that analysis, and this isn't a large change, but I would want to see that. And I think that's justified because, again, with only seeing a piece of your business and not even the full, I guess, financials on the business, it's kind of hard for me to agree without some kind of context from a comparable standpoint. Otherwise, it'd be really similar to you're asking me to help you with a cost to your business. And we want to make sure we're getting a good value for what we receive. It's not our job to manage your margins or, that's your job, right? So that's where I'm kind of running into a little bit of just a intellectual kind of hurdle that I'm going to need to understand more. So
Yep.
that's why I was asking about whether it was volumes or whatever, but
Yeah, and hey,
There's different ways
you're
to
not,
go
you're
about
not
it.
hurting my feelings. I think we totally understand that. We're proud of our work. We stand behind it. We know what we bring to the table, and we love being members of this community. What I flipped to this side and what I wanted to show is, by using CNG trucks, we also are crediting the city a VETC tax credit that we remit 14 cents per resident back to the city as well. That's also an item that wasn't discussed earlier too. So when we're talking about last year, we gave 9 cents back to our residents. We're discounting another 14 cents here. It's already getting very close to the 26 cents per 95-gallon cart that we're asking for per month. So, we're not perfect. We're not going to pretend to be perfect, but we love being here, and we try to provide our value and look in every opportunity that we can give Meridian what we feel like Meridian is owed.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you've been great partners for the city of Meridian, and I have a lot of appreciation for your company and how you've been running things and trying to find efficiencies. I think just the donated services are important and they're a piece of the whole picture. And so that's kind of where I'm getting at with that analysis is, you may donate some services, you may charge more for other services. At the end of the day, it's like, what is the bottom line to us is like kind of how I'm viewing
And
it.
this was, we're presenting kind of a blanket 1.6% rate increase. There are other ways to attack this problem. I don't know if there's an appetite for that. That's something that we've discussed with staff and vicariously the mayor. And so I really yield to them on their decision and what they want to present or suggest or recommend. But there are other ways to do this than a blanket 1.6%. Another statistic that I want to highlight is, right, we're the total ask, right, when we're talking about CPI plus labor, it's a 4.24% increase for a 95-gallon cart. So I think that's important that it's still, it hovers around CPI.
So Court, piggybacking off of this question and some of these, I don't know exactly where we're going to go with my comments, but I guess I got up and talked to the community about the fact that we're only getting 90% of new construction from the state to try to provide services to our community. Someone way back when said 90% of CPI was the appropriateness. I don't know who, how, why, where. Is that appropriate? Why not? Why would we tell you no, not 100% of CPI? And if we went back over the length of this contract and said if it was 100% every year, where would that number get us to today? And so that's, I'm just the other thing that I'll mention is, and so even with the donated services, is it there, should we be looking at truing up to real costs so we're not trading costs and services, they're trading value for what should be a cost to somebody. And again, I don't know who all the roll-offs are for free. If those are all city events, that then becomes a general fund operational expense or a public works enterprise expense that it doesn't impact. But I think those are, is it worth looking at the bigger picture? And that's what some of the comments where you mentioned other ways to do this. There are other ways to do this. You could just go, like say, adjust all of our other services. And my 2 cents so far has been, I think that's a great conversation for when we do the bigger adjustments towards going towards a program that has, green recycling components to it as compared to going and making a bunch of other adjustments throughout the program right now. So just 2 cents on, do we have to chew things up and change, or do you think that this should stay the way it is for the next 10 years?
So here, and I agree with you, Mayor. I think that our opportunity to look at some of these other items, some of these bigger items should come when there's a bigger event, right? When there's something more structural to look at. What I'll say about the 90% of CPI is that forces us to be very efficient. It forces us to run a solid, financially responsible business, right? So I genuinely think that it's an appropriate amount. I don't mind living in the 90% of CPI. I think there just has to be an understanding that when in good faith, that when there's kind of exponential increases in the cost of living that maybe are not accurately reflected in a CPI, right? Because I think we can all agree that the cost of living in the Treasure Valley has gone up disproportionate to any national indice, right? So it's hard to say that that indice really covers us in our costs of doing business here. So my ask is, I think 90% is appropriate because it forces us to live in a cost-constrained environment. It's just that the council comes with an open mind that when we do have some of these costs that we continue our partnership with them. To answer another question that you had more pointedly, if we had received 100% of the CPI over the last 3 years, we would have an additional 1.7 something percent. So we'll just say 1.7% in annual revenue. Now that's non-compounded, but it's 1.7% over the last 3 years. So that would have covered this market adjustment.
Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
Mayor Cord, first a comment, and
Sir?
I support increasing the wages for these folks that It's 107 degrees outside and they're pulling off your lot at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're asking a lot of them. So I think going from 20 to 24 bucks an hour is entirely appropriate for those individuals. Paint a picture for me, though. I live in a fairly small subdivision, 25 homes. Those drivers are efficient. They can work my subdivision probably in 5 to 7 minutes. I've never timed them, but they can get through there in 5 to 7 minutes. So well, Mrs. Whitlock has two 95-gallon cans, so I'll just count one. But if you do the math for me, I mean, in 5 minutes, they're going to more than cover that $4 an hour increase that's being proposed for them. Now, not all subdivisions are created equal, but what I'm trying to drive at is that 26 cents per can an appropriate increase, given the volume that you expect them to produce per, and I don't know how you calculate it, per half hour, per hour, per day?
So talking about the methodology of how this kind of all worked out, essentially like Meridian's piece of our total market adjustment, because we're so embedded into the communities here, we can't just say we're going to raise City of Star or the City of Meridian or City of Boise's drivers' wages. I mean, that's something that's been thrown around before. Like if somebody's willing to pay their drivers more, do we just pay those drivers more? But ultimately that just causes labor relations issues. So we have to keep things even across our cities. And that's why when you ask for like a cost of service analysis, what you're going to find from Republic is we're very even amongst all of our municipalities here, depending on the level of service they want, right? Like Boise has mandatory organics, green waste, right? So that's going to be an additional charge that they have that our folks here don't have unless they have it in subscription, right? But that $390,000 is essentially, it works out to be 1.6% across every line item in the rate sheet. And when you just take a weighted average of all of those, it translates out to that $390,000. And so happens on a 95-gallon cart, 1.6% is 26 cents. So that's kind of how we came up with that number. And I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again, we run a very efficient operation and our numbers are very dialed in. Our overhead in our cost of doing business is not limited to what we see here. We have a call center in Phoenix. There's a lot of, we have corporate legal fees, we have rents, we have, depreciation of all of our infrastructure, be it a transfer station or the hauling yard with the CNG rails. And so there's a lot going on up and above the collection.
Ms. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
Board, you had a few high-level questions.
Yes, sir.
This is a low-level question.
Okay.
When my neighbors asked me what this increase looks like, could you just go over one more time based on either the 95-gallon, most of my neighbors all have 95s, whether it's recycling or trash.
Your rate is going up $1.03, and 26 cents of that is dedicated to labor.
And that's per 95-gallon container.
That's for the first 95-gallon container at your house. The second cart is just subject to CPI. We are not touching those rates beyond CPI.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Council, any additional questions or comments? I don't even know if we're through all your presentation, if there's still more to go.
We skipped a couple slides that I think are a little redundant. I think we got the gist of what we needed out there.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
what labor increases are you proposing for other cities?
The same. Here, all of our drivers are going to do this, and we're making this ask of all of our cities. And if it's any consolation for a yes vote, Boise is going to has committed and they're under their contract to do this.
I was just more curious. Okay. Well, I think we can reflect that information in the comparables worksheet, and that would help us understand how it would likely shake out. And again, I'm not trying to argue or anything. It's just any business could try to pass through a cost increase, right? It's not for me to judge whether your margins are appropriate or you're efficient or not. It's really more at bottom line, are we getting the right value still? And my guess is yes, but let's take a look at the information.
You owe it to your constituents, just like we owe it to our organization, and we totally understand.
Yep. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
if we are at the end of the presentation, I guess I do have maybe some requests between now and before a formal action is going to be taken, if now is the appropriate time for that.
It's appropriate as I'm aware, so go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Court, apologies for not being there in person. So first, maybe just a quick comment. Really want to commend the Republic staff. I really feel the level of customer service has really improved over the past 5 or 6 years. I remember when I was first on the council, I had some real concerns with the feedback that I was hearing from our citizens about response or follow-up, and I really feel like that Republic has stepped up big to be a good partner in our community. And Court, I know that's in the DNA of your organization. I want to commend you and your staff for leaning into that. A couple of maybe comments or some requests. And I think the first kind of begs to the question about the contract. And again, I've been on the council for 10 years, and it seems every couple of years the council has a conversation, should we look at doing a new contract? And ultimately the decision is, hey, that's maybe not in the best interest of our community, or maybe it's not the best interest of the public. It's mutually beneficial, and so we continue to move on. Where I'm starting to scratch my head a little more, and I don't know what the answer is, but I can appreciate from your standpoint as a business operation that you're providing a lot of charitable services to the city of Meridian, and our residents benefit from that, whether they realize that or not. Likewise, there are requests like the labor request that comes before that is an out of contract request. And they all may pencil out in the end. I think for me, the piece that I always focus on is how are we being the most transparent with our citizens, right? All the charitable acts that you do for our community, how are we doing a good job of communicating them? And is it better to capture all of the charitable acts that you do in a new contract that provides you greater mechanisms for labor requests or other requests that you want to make? I don't know what the answer on that is, but I know when it seems every time that Republic comes before with a labor or with a price increase request, is that we're reminded about all the things that you guys provide that are not included in the contract. So that may be a conversation for a later date. I guess what I would like to see between now and when a formal request is going to be asked of council to make is a handful of things. So one, Mr. Mayor, is I guess maybe for you to work with our CFO. I'd like a detailed analysis so that I can fully understand how labor impacts CPI. That's something that I felt like when we last had our conversation about a labor increase, that was a piece that came up. And so I'd like some greater understanding. Second to that, I would also like to see a 10-year snapshot of these items that are before us right here on the slide. So yes, it's a small amount this year, but that is on top of another small amount a year before and before and before. And I want to make sure that I've got a good understanding as to the totality of those increases and what they've all resulted in terms of improving the level of service. And certainly, Cord, I appreciate you sharing the vast majority of the people that drive our routes in Meridian, our Meridian residents. I think it's a top priority for all of us. We want people to be able to live and work in our community in all different job sectors. And you sharing that to me is really, really compelling. I just want to make sure that I've got the clearest and most transparent amount of information before I'm asked to make a decision.
We totally understand that. I don't see a problem with being able to provide a lot of that information. And what I do want to qualify though, because I just don't want there to be any misconceptions. Not all 29 of those drivers service the city of Meridian. You know, we don't necessarily like pair people to Meridian routes.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is 29 of our drivers support this contract, and there's only 31 routes being run. So it's almost a 1-to-1 across the business unit.
Nevertheless, I appreciate that.
Alex, anything you'd like to add based upon the requests you've heard and timing for all aspects moving forward, including when the proposed rate increase would like to be considered so we can appropriately time out next steps?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think we have anything to add. We'll work on these items. I don't think this is a heavy ask at this point, so I think we can get these things pulled together relatively quickly. We have most of this data already, so we'll do our best to stay on track with our original schedule in terms of trying to get all of this wrapped up in time for the new fiscal year on October 1. So nothing to add on that right now. I think we can get this pulled together relatively quickly.
So either next Tuesday or the one September 9th? 10th?
We'll commit to next Tuesday at this
You're going
point.
to commit to next Tuesday? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
is that committing to provide the information by next Tuesday?
Yes.
Because then we also have to review all the information. So I would say give yourself a couple weeks to work through the whole process. I don't know. Yeah.
How about information by next Friday and coming
We can
back
do
on the
that.
10th of September for any questions or additional presentation?
You see, this is another workshop session probably at
Yes.
this juncture.
That's, if that, yeah. And we can work with council to see if they have questions that they need answered to determine whether or not it will actually be on, or if the information is enough at that point in time. And Council President, you can make that decision. I see
Okay.
that face. Okay, remember?
Just more thinking, Mayor, more thinking.
Yes,
So, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neary.
Mr. Members of Council, I guess, I think the only question we have is noticing up for a increase. If we're trying to get an increase in place by October 1, we can notice up a hearing for an increase with whatever the highest amount that they're requesting, kind of like we do for the budget. Or do you want us to wait till you have another workshop in 2 weeks and then begin the noticing process? We will miss October 1 in that case.
Well, that's kind of what I was referring to in terms of our time frame.
Yeah.
That I think Alex is trying to push till next Tuesday, so we didn't fall behind.
Right.
But it's a combination of information, meetings. You could do it on the 3rd as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think unless council has an objection, us noticing at the requested amount, very similar to how we would do budget, and then we can make a formal decision on the 10th.
Not seeing any objection to that viewpoint, we'll move forward.
So we'll proceed then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council. We sure appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council, we're at the end of our work session. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is August 20th, 2024 at 6 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh,
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts, Councilman Taylor,
Here.
Councilman Overton,
Here.
Councilman Whitlock,
Here.
Councilwoman Strainer, Mayor Simmons.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Okay, it appears our community invocation presenter is not here. So with that, we will move on to adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
no changes to the agenda, but maybe a preview for people that item number 8, the Timber Creek recycling application is going to be continued to September 17th. So if you were here specifically for that, just a heads up that that will be continued. But with that, I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. First item before us this evening is a public hearing for the City of Meridian fiscal year 2024 amended budget. I will turn this over to Jenny.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
Mr. Mayor. Sorry, just want to point out the public forum. There was nobody
Oh,
to sign
I'm
up.
sorry.
Just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so for our fiscal year 24 amended budget, our agenda tonight is simple. We are going to go over our high-level overview of what our amended budget is at 241.3 million. I'm going to go over our 3 major reporting funds: governmental fund, capital improvement fund, and enterprise fund. We will need a motion to approve our fiscal year 24 amended budget at the end of this presentation. I wanted to remind everyone that in the following slides that I'm going to present, I'm going to go total city budget, then through the individual reporting funds, going to go over what the changes from the original total city budget to our final amended. Now, just a reminder, these budget amendments have come before you the last 10 months. This is more of a review and it's a formal process for us to notify our citizens in the state of what our final fiscal year 24 amended budget is. So our total city budget, it is up 3.3% from our original budget that was announced this time last year. And that is a makeup of 24 budget amendments that was presented. It equates to about $7.7 million. And in our general fund, you'll see there, these are the changes according to the major reporting funds of the 3. I'm going to go over those in detail. In our governmental fund, we saw an 18.4% increase, and that equates to about $20 million. That is made up of 20 total budget amendments. So I'm going to go over the major ones that you've seen. So 19 million of that is attributed to our ARPA fund, most of our grant funds, SAFER, Lender Overpass, and our CDBG grant. Another big ticket item that we amended our budget for is our community center property, and then our HRMS, our Workday software implementation. We did see a carry forward adjustment that was down about 5.4 million. In our capital improvement fund, there were no budget amendments that were approved. We did see a carry forward adjustment that is a reduction of 5.6 million, and that's attributed to our Northwest Police Station, Fire Station 7 and 8. In our enterprise fund, we saw a reduction of 5.7. It was down from the original. The amended budget is at $110 million. That is made up of 4 budget amendments that were approved. They are listed on the screen: East Idaho project, well 26, 29, and then a $7.9 million carry forward adjustment. That was short and sweet. So now I sit for a motion to approve our fiscal year 24 amended budget.
Thank you, Jenny. Council, any questions for staff on the fiscal year 24 amended budget?
Mr. Mayor.
It is a public hearing. Oh, question for staff? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to testify on the FY 24 amended budget? Ms. Clerk, do we have anybody sign up?
Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay, is there anybody that'd like to come forward? And if you're online, use the raise your hand function. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand? Councilwoman Roberts,
Would move that we close the public hearing.
a motion and a second to close the public hearing on item 1. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Mayor, I move that we approve the amended budget, $241,358,900.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the FY 24 amended budget, the amount of $358,900. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Okay. Next item up is item 2, which is a public hearing for City of Meridian fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. And it's over to Jenny again.
Hello again. Our agenda for our fiscal year 25 proposed budget, I'm going to go over our budget process overview. And then similar to what we just did, I'm going to go high-level overview of our proposed budget in the 3 major reporting funds. And then there will be a discussion because this is a public hearing. We will have a couple items in our, after we present our proposed budget. And then I am also seeking a motion to approve our fiscal year 25 proposed budget. So with that, there's a lot going on the screen. That's because our budget development process is a very lengthy one. It spans over about 9 months long. We began preparing our proposed budget in February, and in March, each department, along with each council liaison, their council liaison and mayor, conducts thorough reviews of our base budget, that we examine each base budget line items to ensure we're in alignment. And at the end of May, the proposed budget is then presented to council and the public for review. We held 2 public budget workshops, one in June and one in July. This is to gather feedback, refine our budget, and address any concerns and questions. These feedbacks or these workshops play a critical role because it shapes our budget, our final budget as it sits today. Again, it gets us to August. So upon the closure of tonight's public hearing, the annual budget is approved by council. I just want to make an important recognition. So this overview doesn't really capture the intense internal discussions, our backroom discussions, our behind the scene work that's involved in this lengthy process. So each of these processes that you see here involves internal discussion, detailed analysis, and then careful planning goes into each of these processes that is not captured on the screen here. So for that, I want to say a huge thank you to Mayor, each council member, department directors, and staff on your time invested in this process. So now I get to the number part. The graph on the left are expenses. The the personnel budget is about 35% of our total budget, and it remains our largest expense category. Now, carry forward, as you can see, equates to about 30% of our total budget. These are budgets that will not be finished in our current fiscal year 24, that will be carried into fiscal year 25. The distribution of the budget amongst the different departments are displayed in the graph to the right. And our biggest consumer right now is our wastewater department at 41%. Now I'm going to go over our three major reporting funds, starting with our governmental fund. This is our revenue sources in our governmental fund. We're currently projected at about $102.3 million. Majority or half of the governmental fund is of our property tax. So 50% is our property tax. Now the proposed budget does take into consideration the 3% allowable option, property tax option, which calculates on average to a cost of a property homeowner about 48 cents a month per 100,000 taxable value. Just as a reminder, our projected lower levy rate year over year. So this year we are projecting a lower levy rate. So in other words, if the house value does not change, then the property tax paid would be lower.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
if you don't mind, I think this is a really important point. And maybe Jenny, we could kind of talk about that. So, I think where people get confused a little bit is there's kind of a little bit of a black box, right? When it comes to how property tax increases flow through to the actual homeowner. I think you're making an important point, which is that because the proposal is the maximum 3% allowable property tax increase plus 1% of our foregone revenue. Ultimately, though, if someone, in your example, if someone's home decreased in value or stayed the same because the levy rate is going down, that individual might not see any increase. They may actually see a decrease in their total property tax. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so I think that's important for people to understand because it doesn't flow directly through to you when you pay your tax bill. It depends on what's happening with the value of your property. And so I just wanted to make sure people kind of understood that piece before we moved on.
Now I'm going to switch to our expenditure side of the general fund or governmental fund. In our governmental fund, the largest component is our personnel expense, and that is made up of 67% or equivalent to $74 million. The distribution of the budget amongst the different departments in the governmental fund is displayed to your right. Public safety makes up the majority of our budget at 62%. In our capital improvement fund, in our current proposed budget, we didn't have any new budget requests. The entire capital improvement fund is made up of our carry forward, and that is attributed to projects such as Fire Station 7 and 8. Now I'm going to move on to our last major reporting fund, and that is our enterprise fund. The majority of the revenue is made up of our utility sales revenue, and that is 61%, following by assessment revenue at 28%. Our total expenditures in enterprise fund is about $144.4 million. Now, unlike the governmental fund, where personnel is the largest expense, enterprise fund, largest expense is in our capital projects. So between the new capital funding and the prior year capital projects that are carried forward, you can see 78% of the enterprise fund budget is in our capital expenditures. Again, the graph on the right depicts the different departments, the distribution amongst the budget within the different departments. So that's the number talks. We can take public comments right now and then get into other discussions.
Thank you, Jenny. So council, from our last budget hearing where we did ask the directors to sit down with their liaisons and go over their base budgets one more time for any possible changes that did result in a recommended reduction of 22,332 over the amount that was requested in the dollar figure that you previously approved. So if there's a motion to approve this budget, we would request that $22,332, and finance has information about where those reductions would be set within the budget. With that, council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
maybe just a comment for the public's benefit. I think it might be helpful to them to understand how city council approved or approached the budgeting process. So in March, as part of our role on the city council, we go through every department's base budget and we go line by line through those. Then in addition to that, the city council president and I actually went ourselves a couple of months ago, line by line through the entire budget, having a discussion about potential items that we could economize on. And then in addition to that, following our second workshop meeting, every single council member met individually with the departments they cover and went through their base budgets again to try to identify opportunities where we could save money or economize. So I just think that's helpful, at least as I've been speaking with my constituents, for them to understand that we understand how inflation is hurting people, and we've taken very seriously the idea that we need to tighten our own belts as we go through this process to try to identify those opportunities. We didn't identify a lot of opportunities, and I think part of that is that Meridian has always been very fiscally responsible and very conservative in how we've approached our budgeting, but we've taken a really hard look at that through our process. So I just wanted people to kind of understand as we're going through this that the city council took this all as kind of our personal mission to try to identify further opportunities, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So just so people understand that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
just a question for Jenny, and maybe to remind us, when we went through the workshop process, we did turn over every stone and look in every corner and behind every couch cushion for what we could find. It totaled, as I recall, about 900,000 total out of those 4 different categories.
From our budget workshops, we can look it up.
It was significant.
Okay, yes, yes.
And Mr. Mayor, while we're looking for that, in addition to what Councilwoman Strader said about the extra effort that's gone into tightening our belts, again, I think as a council, we worked pretty well together in those workshops to ask hard questions. We've taken tours and gone around and looked at things and kicked the tires. And I think there were some significant savings that we were able to find during those workshops.
It was a little over $1 million. So $1 million and then $5,170.
Thank you. Council, any additional questions for staff before we take any public testimony? Okay, Ms. Clerk, do we have anybody sign up to provide testimony?
Mr. Mayor, yes, Terry Dennington.
Evening, Terry. Please state your name and address for the record. Be recognized for 3 minutes.
Terry Dennington, 4581 West Big Creek Street in Meridian. And I would like to address Mayor Simonson and the council members. Thank you so much for having me. My first comment would be to thank the Todd's Department, Finance Division, Jenny and Ricardo. They are so helpful in getting the budget proposal to me so that I can go through it and understand it and then I came to the first workshop. It was very interesting, a long day, but very interesting to see exactly how the process worked and how it all comes together. So I understand it's not easy, when you're a resident out here and you don't really have to make the decisions. It's easy to be saying, well, why are they doing this and why aren't they doing that? And they're charging, this, all this money's going up. But it's not an easy process, so I understand that and I see that, so. But the one comment I did want to make was on the firefighters, the 18 firefighters, and I know that that's an issue. My issue with that is really when we take federal funds and there's a grant that they don't, it's a period of time that they give it to you, and then it's up to you to make a decision on how you're going to fund that, either keeping those people in place or having to let them all go, depending on what you do. So I understand how you were increasing, trying to foresee how that was going to happen, how you're going to be able to keep them, and maybe not keep them all. So that's another part of that process that I wondered about, like, should we have taken all 18 or should we have done 15? Or, I don't know that decision or how it came from fire chief to you guys to make that decision on that. But again, I'm just not a big fan of federal because virtually the money is coming from me, even federally, right? So I have to pay for that, even though they're washing it through to our city. So I just wanted to make a comment. I know that it's not an easy process. I understand why you were trying to offset it because of some of the other things that came into play in the employees part of that. And that was a big input of money that you were trying to, an expense that you weren't expecting, and then having to try and figure out how to then offset that with that. But that's my comments on the firefighters. I know our city's growing, and as residents out here, we have to kind of weigh when you're going to increase to cover for safety, you have to decide, well, we cannot pay for it and say, okay, well, we don't have the firefighters or the police to be in position for us to help us. They can't be everywhere. The police can't be everywhere all the time. So that being said, I think it's not an easy process. So thank you so much. I appreciate all that you guys do.
Thank you, Terry. Council, any questions for Terry? The only thing I'll just as because you may not have heard at one point in time, we originally got the grant for 24 and we did reduce it down to 18. That's still a stretch goal. I think that it's clear that we all recognize that is what we are hoping for. And, it's our intention to keep as many as we can through the process as revenue is created. But there are some other mechanisms as well with upcoming retirements to consider whether or not that is. But it is a stretch goal, 100%. So thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. Ms. Quirk, we have anybody else sign up in advance?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Is there anybody present that'd like to come forward and present testimony either in the room or online? You can use the raise your hand function. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand, council, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
close the public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
I move that we approve this budget as presented with the deductions of 22,332. If my math is right, that gives us a total of 255,501,778 to be corrected by finance if necessary.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
not sure. I think I heard 501,000 when it is 511,000. Just a minor update.
Your ear may have been correct in how it was said. So the motion maker, 255,511,778, correct? Second, correct?
Second agrees.
Okay, just so it's clearly stated with no numbers on the record.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
a question then maybe for clarification with our finance staff. I know the foregone is a separate conversation for us here in a minute. But because there's been some emails going back and forth and some of your comments, I want to make sure that I'm hearing from finance correctly, and I want to make sure that I'm not mishearing, which is if council approves this budget and assuming home values stay flat, our residents wouldn't expect a property tax increase. Is that what I heard from our finance staff?
Confirmed, yes.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think, Mr. Mayor, I think many of us saw, at least in the Cavanagh household this year, the value of our home went down for the first time in a long time, but we have typically seen a 2 to 8% increase in home values. So I guess my follow-up question would be is for our finance staff, if home values appreciated an average of 2.5% because of the growth, would our citizens then expect to see a property tax increase, or they expect to still see things flat?
Mr. Mayor, Luke, just want to clarify, did you say 2.75% increase? Is that what I heard you say?
Mr. Mayor, thanks, Todd. I said 2.5%.
Apologies, thank you. So in that particular case, most likely you'll see a 0.75% increase in your total property taxes because your levy rate is reducing at a projected 1.75% reduction. So if your house went up 2.5 and your levy rate went down 1.75, you would have that gap of an increase, and that would be your increase. I think that's where you're trying to go with your math.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Lavoy, for helping me kind of confirm my back of napkin math. I appreciate that.
No problem, Luke. I think you're on the right page.
So, Mr. Mayor, a couple comments, if I may.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Council, Mayor, certainly in our budget hearings, we took ample time to thank Mayor and our finance staff, our directors, for really, really great work. And I want to take just a quick moment before a vote is put out to thank this council. This is, I think, my 9th or 10th year doing this. And this is the most engaged city council I've ever worked with when it comes to the budget. And I really want to commend you. There's some big highlights that I think that we should be celebrating along with our mayor. Right out the gate, I think our very first action, our very first budget hearing was fixing the COLA inconsistency for our employees. We put our employees first when we started our budget. And I think that's a really, really big deal. Before we talked about anything else, we said we're going to level set that. I think that takes real discipline. I want to thank the mayor and council for that. Second of all, I want to commend Council Vice President Schrader. I think the term that she used in our last budget hearing was good hygiene. While I recognize the timing of it is challenging, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our citizens and to the city every year to continue to look at ongoing expenses and make sure that there's an ongoing need. We know that missions change, technology changes, and we owe it to ourselves to take always a hard look to say, hey, if we put dollars in this budget item, for the last 5 years, do we need to keep doing that? So I want to commend our vice president for leading that. And then council, I want to thank all of you. You all have so many things that are going on your plate and in your life with your family. And to go back through kind of another exercise again and relook at the base budget, that takes a lot of extra effort. I know there's been a lot of conversations. I know you have heard from constituents. I've heard from constituents. We have talked. We have tussled and wrestled with each other as friends. And I just want to thank you all. Collaboration sometimes is clunky. And just because we're not always on the same page with all issues, it doesn't mean that we don't all work well together. And as I've seen some other cities have their budget process play out, again, I don't know how the vote is going to land tonight. Being frank, I still don't quite know how I'm going to vote on this one tonight. I just have such appreciation for the level of care that you bring to the city. I'm sure many of you have been like me and have played devil's advocate. People have called me with concerns about the budget. I've said, yeah, but what about A, B, and C that are important? For people who come and say, hey, I support the budget, I'm devil's advocate again. Hey, what about property tax increases? And so I just think that we're a good example of collaboration in so many senses. And before a vote is taken, I want to make sure on the record to thank you all individually for some tremendous work on this year's budget.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I can take just a minute. to reiterate where I stood when we had the budget hearings. And I said at that time that I never wanted to stand here and approve a budget percentage that was this high. I'm trying to figure out how to explain that. And probably the best way is to start out talking about all of our own personal lives, because we've all had to deal with inflation. And I'll give you my standard. I'm not the polished politician. I spent 3 decades working for the city before I became a city councilman. So what you're going to get is a straight shooting response, not necessarily something that's really polished. For the past 2 years, I've received a 1% cost of living increase. That's it. Inflation was way higher than that. During that time, I'd run to the grocery store and I'm paying 5 to 10% more for a bag of groceries. It looks the same as it did 2 years ago. I'm getting nothing more, but I'm paying more. Same goes for gas. Same goes for many different things. The difference here as a city is we're asking for that full 3%, but we're delivering a pretty amazing package of new employees, new positions to continue to deliver the best public safety we can in this city, to continue with the best public services in our wastewater and water department. We're continuing to try to deliver what makes Meridian great. So when people talk about when's the appropriate time to pay an increase, it's when you're getting something out of it. And when I look at all these bills that we're receiving and contracts that we're receiving as a city, and they're going up 7% and one over 30%, and all we're getting is exactly what we got last year. But they pass those expenses right on to us. If you think that that's frustrating, you have no idea what it's like for the city council members to sit up here and try to figure out how on earth we're going to progress as a city, keep all of our levels and standards the same height, and pay all those bills. It's extremely frustrating. I loved all the years that I worked for the city and sitting here in city council when we could provide a budget where I think we were giving the residents of the city of Meridian everything on sale. We never asked for 3%. We could get by on 1.9. We could get by on 1.6. And we could do it successfully because we had dedicated employees that work hard every day for this city. And we work hard to make sure that we keep them. This year is the first year I can remember that we've had to not only take the full 3%, but as we get into the next item and we talk about the foregone, because we have to make up for the fact that everybody's increasing what they expect out of us. And we have to keep those levels of service as high as we can to our citizens. And if you take this all the way back to how you sit in your own personal situation at home, I think that's where it really starts to make sense, because we are delivering something for that increase. You're not just getting the same old thing you got last year. We're going to keep those standards high. We want to make sure that this still is the place you want to live. This is the place when you dial 911, you get officers, whether it's fire or police, and that when you flush that handle and you turn that knob, you get the best water service and the best sewer service you can get. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for a single one of us. There wasn't one of us as we went through here that jumped up and said, this is what we want to do. This was hard decisions. And as President Kavanaugh said, it was a lot of work, a lot of gut-wrenching work, because we never thought we'd be in this position that we're in this year. But I feel very good about this budget. I think we've made every cut possible wherever we can, but continue to meet our demands. One last point. Another city in this valley approved their budget the other day, and they had an issue when it came to their public safety. And it came down to they did not know what their public safety needs were. In our case, we had a PAM model, a very detailed report on exactly what we needed from our public safety for our city. And we've been following that. And there's most of those new positions you see are in our police department, besides the ones with the grant coming in the fire department. But what you don't see is that in order for us to actually be right where we need to be on that PAM model for where we need to be as a city, we'd have to somehow pull another $1 million out of our hat to get the remaining number of officers that we simply can't bring on this year, that we're going to have to take a serious look at next year as we continue to try to meet the needs of the city and keep it the place that everyone expects it to be. So thank you for your patience. Trust me, you've got a hardworking group of people up here, all trying to provide the best level of service to you, because we all live here as well. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I agree with all of those comments made by Councilmember Overton. I completely agree. I think, also for helpful context, and the mayor made this comment in one of our workshop meetings, but I think it's worth reiterating the history of the property tax increases that the city of Meridian has taken in recent years, starting in FY 21, 0%, 1.9%, 3%, and then 1.6%. I think that's really important because during that same time period, the cumulative amount of inflation has been over 20%. So I think it kind of shows you we've been trying to hold the line, but we have reached a point where we have to prioritize our public safety. I know not everyone agrees with taking a federal grant, and there are real challenges with that. It is giving us the ability to surge our hiring in an area that is sorely needed, where we have areas of our city that have very long response times. And I give people the example of, the Monday after 4th of July, where we had 3 simultaneous fires and we had to have multiple jurisdictions help us respond to that. So it's a frustration, I think, shared by city council and our citizens that growth has brought us to a point we have a lot of challenges in our personnel trying to staff up to accommodate it. It is a reality of where we're at. And I think, continuing to prioritize public safety, but finding those common sense cuts where we can is the right approach. So I just wanted to provide a little more context on the history.
Council, any additional comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, I appreciate all those comments, and I do want to publicly thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your staff and all the council members for the good work and for your patience as we kind of work through this. Jenny, you did a good job highlighting sort of how long these processes take, and I think that's okay. I think it's good that it takes a little bit of time. We try to be accountable and transparent with our constituency and allow them to participate as much as we can. And so I really appreciate that. I think that's okay. When I consider the budget, it's not to me just setting a number for what we're going to spend that year. Really, this is a policy statement. This is a document that says these are our priorities. It highlights sort of where we've been, but I think more importantly, it's sort of charting a path forward, says, here's where we're going. So I think as we contemplate our votes tonight, I think I just want to highlight a couple items of maybe where we've been, right? And I just taking some of these numbers from the budget document that the public had access to. Since fiscal year 2022 till now, we're looking at a budget where the revenue is $39 million higher. We're looking at total expenditures of $136 million higher than they were in fiscal year 22. And I recognize a lot of that is one-time capital outlays for a lot of some critical infrastructure. So it's not an apple to apples comparison here, but we do need to recognize that's a significant change from where we were just a few years ago. And I think when you break down those expenditures, you're looking at, our personnel budget over that same time frame. It's up almost $30 million a year. The capital outlays this year are up about 94 million more than they were in 22. Our operating costs are up 13 million. So there's some, the city has grown a lot, but we've certainly grown a lot with it in terms of where we've spent. And I think when you dig down and you say, well, what are the real drivers of our growth and spending? We saw it tonight, 62% is our commitment to public safety. And I think when you dig a little deeper, you look at the other departments and we see really fairly modest year-over-year growth with the rest of our departments. And so I think if our public safety budget is really one of the main drivers to these budget increases, I think we as a city council should ask ourselves, is our commitment to public safety, is it too much, is it too little, or is it just right? And I think each of us can answer that question appropriately, however, our, whatever our background is in informing us in that decision. So I think that's kind of where we've been. Now we look at kind of where we're going with what we've got proposed. There's some good things. I actually have enjoyed this process. I really appreciate the opportunity to take 3 bites at the apple in terms of finding some savings. I commend everyone. So we have made some cuts. We've kept our commitments to our city staff. We've made some really good investments in some critical infrastructure in our water and wastewater, and we continue to find ways to still continue to make some strategic investments in parks and other aspects of the community. So I do think there's a lot I really like about the budget. But there's some things I'm a little concerned about, right? Like I've made it clear the 3% and the foregone, that does concern me. I'm also concerned by the fact that we're looking at some departments in the city are having to delay some of their strategic investments or moving ahead with programs or with some personnel hires. That's a fact. We are trading one value for another. Public safety is one of probably our most important priority. So it deservedly has more of our finances and our attention. But we need to understand really the trade-off. There is a real trade-off here. Let me speak about the SAFER grant just a little bit. I think from a public safety point of view, it was a great decision, right? It was a good decision. When you look at it in terms of just strictly on paper, a budget impact, just in a vacuum, we recognize the challenges it brought to us in terms of making our budget work and be able to invest in other priorities. What's concerning to me, and we heard it a little bit in the public testimony today, we took the federal grant, and now we're looking at how to trim and cut budgets where we can, and we're looking at taking the full 3% in the foregone in order to pay for when the federal money ends. I struggle with that. I do. That's not a secret to anybody. I agree with the strategic decision to move to 4-person teams with the fire department. I do. I think that makes sense. I think that's the right strategic decision, but I wish we could have grown into it a little bit more slowly. So I just want to kind of put that out there. I wish we could have got there a little bit more slowly, but I also want to emphasize this. I don't fault anybody, the mayor, anybody on council, the fire department, or anyone who advocated that we take that money. I don't fault anyone for doing it for the wrong reason, because I know the intent behind it was to provide elevated services to our citizens and to provide a higher level of safety to our firefighters. And so I applaud that. I applaud the intent behind it, but we recognize it comes at a cost. So we have to weigh the cost in terms of the other impacts. I know I'm getting long. I'll try to wrap this up here, but so where are we going? Right, we're still looking at budget cuts in terms of this, kind of going through this exercise, holding our spending in check as much as we can. We're still looking at 3% and taking foregone in the future, and we're still unclear maybe how this works out. And I think when we consider how this impacts our citizens, we should consider sort of the holistic approach here, right? Councilwoman Strader mentioned inflation's up over 20% since February of 2020. We know that I was looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They track 400 items that people typically would fall under your consumer items. Only 6% are cheaper, which means 94% of the items people buy on a daily basis are up. Housing, the average home price in Ada County is up 72% over the last 5 years. Rent is up 35%. So when you consider the inputs and outputs of a family in Meridian, it's clear we have a larger problem in society. People are being squeezed everywhere they turn around, and Councilman Overton did a great job highlighting that. We know that the federal government's fiscal policies are actually causing some real harm to people. So I asked myself, why are we demanding even more from the people of Meridian? Like, why are we asking so much from them? And when you view this budget in just a vacuum, I think it's a great budget. I actually do. I think it's a good budget when you view it in a vacuum, but you can't do that. You have to consider everything when you're trying to make these decisions. So just, a small leak in a boat will sink a ship. I worry about the small little increases here and there that the people are facing every day. And I I would be careful if we want to suggest that a couple dollars a month is affordable for people. It's like that drip, drip, drip. People are paying more everywhere they turn. So let me close with this. In summary, like there's a lot of good things, and I'm grateful for the process. I've learned a lot. I have a lot more respect for everyone and their involvement. There's some things that concern me. By voting for this budget, I'm putting my name next to a document that says, I think we're going in the right direction. But I can't say with 100% confidence that I would agree with that statement. So I won't be supporting the budget tonight.
Council, any additional comments? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Yes.
Little Roberts,
Aye.
Taylor,
No.
Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
5 ayes, 1 nay, and the motion to approve in the revised amount of 255,511,778 is approved. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next item, which is a public hearing to collect foregone revenue associated with fiscal year 2025 budget. I'll turn this over to Jenny.
Okay. Last item for our budget, we are looking for a motion to collect our foregone in the amount of $504,546. And this is associated specifically for funding our firefighter personnel expenses.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Council, any questions for staff? Okay, this is a public hearing. Do we have anybody signed up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we have Rick Schultz.
Rick Brett? Good evening. If you state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is Rick Schultz, 998 West Kimmer Street, Meridian. Thank you for having me up here, and thank you for all you do. So I'm opposed to any property tax or foregone revenue increases, as not all Meridian residents are rich California transplants here with large bank accounts. Many are elderly, on fixed income, struggling to pay their grocery taxes. An increase in tax is largely based on greed, I feel, especially when our property taxes are based on an artificially inflated property value assessment, and we are expected to pay taxes based on those assessed values. We are overtaxed up to and including a grocery tax. Meridian has seen expansive growth and increased revenues in the past few years as more and more people and businesses are moving in here. The last thing folks need is yet another increase on existing taxes. Some would argue that we need additional tax revenues for roads and street maintenance. Meridian doesn't have this. Unlike most other cities, including many local ones, Meridian does not have the added expense of maintaining its roadways. Those expenses are borne on ACHD and ITD. These are large expenses that the city doesn't have to budget for. In addition, Meridian doesn't have the expense of abundant crime and homeless issues that many other cities have. We need to ask our city government to be responsible and manage or even reduce its budget rather than burdening the people with additional taxes that only cause further hardship. Again, I ask the city not to put more on the backs of its citizens in this time of economic stress. Frankly, I'm saddened, but I do believe that on this matter in particular, the good citizens of Meridian will not have any say. On another note, this is off the cuff, but Ms. Schrader, you had mentioned something about the Monday, the fires. I wasn't aware of the fires after 4th of July. This concerns me, and I'm sure it concerns you guys. My concern is, let's go back to safety. I don't see anything done in this city about fireworks. Are they illegal? From my understanding, they are. I invite you all to my neighborhood on any 4th of July. we'll have a party. But this really concerns me. We're talking about safety, but those fires, I'll bet you they could have been, try, I'm getting nervous up here, but
You're good.
we didn't need those fires. They didn't have to happen. What are we going to do going forward in the future? Is this a police issue or is this a fire issue? Whose issue is it? It's not mine because I'm paying my taxes. But I got people down the street whose bushes are catching on fire, and the neighbors are having to come over and put these fires out. If you can't tell, I'm frustrated, but we're here talking about safety. And I'm asking you, consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Schultz, do you mind coming back? Yeah. That's okay.
Public speaker.
No, you did a great job, and it's nerve-wracking coming up in front of a bunch of people. To your point about the fires, just on that point, so we had a structure fire, a brush fire, and a residential fire. From my understanding, none of those was related to fireworks,
Okay,
but coincidences happen.
okay.
Those three happened at once. It was just an example. I think it's important, like one thing I heard from you is you value that we don't have a huge crime issue or a huge homelessness issue. And I just kind of wanted to have a dialogue with you because I feel like part of our success is our investment and commitment to public safety. You know, I understand this is a very challenging economic environment for people. So I get your point, but from your review of the budget, or do you have the impression that there's something we shouldn't be spending money on, I guess would be my question to you. Do you feel like there's something wasteful that you've found, or do you feel like there's something that shouldn't be as much of a priority? I'm just curious if you have any feedback, you know, more specifically.
Not in particular. I mean, I don't know your entire budget, so I'll, I'll attest
And
to
it's a
that.
huge document to go
Right.
through.
I mean,
Oh.
you folks do, so you know where things can be cut back and where they can't. All I'm saying, for the most part, is that we as citizens are bearing a brunt of things, just like your costs are going up as well. So are ours, all the way to the grocery store, the taxes. We're here tonight talking about possible reduction in property values. That's a possible, yet not probable. I mean, we're not guaranteed. So no one knows whether we're going to get an increase or, like you said, a possible decrease. I don't know that any one of us are comforted enough out here to say that we are going to see a decrease of any kind, especially when we're taking 3% plus foregone. I mean, I think we're digging a little deep. It's kind of you understand your costs are going up, but so are we. And if our property values go up, it does us no good on paper. That's like a 401k. It does us no good until we cash out. We're not all selling our homes. A lot of us are stuck here because we want to be. We moved here because we do love it here. We do appreciate it. I do love Meridian. And I don't mean to stand here and come down on you. I apologize if I come off that way.
This is a group that's not
Um,
easily offended. We're used to having tough conversations, so.
We're all frustrated, and I guess this is one of those times where we can lash out. Nothing is personal. But I hope you consider, I'm not standing here saying that we should cut back on fire or police. I'm pro-fire, pro-police. But I think we have to be prudent in the future. Like, we're taking these federal funds, but we're going to have to pay for their retirement in the end. So we have to look far out in the distance, right? the cost of maintaining the firefighters. I know we need them. We ask a lot of the city, and we appreciate what you do, really. We do love the city. And I thank you for letting me go way over my time and for you engaging with me.
Yeah, of course.
That's more than a lot of cities would do, and appreciate all of you, even though I'm not making eye contact with all of you, but thank you. I mean, I'm not coming down on the city, and I apologize if it seems that I'm hearing of all these increased expenses. We're going to be paying more now for sewer and water as well. And then we ask ourselves as consumers, citizens, what's next? I think nothing is comfortable for us out here. Everywhere we go, we see increased costs, but like you do. But all I'm saying is if there's anywhere that you can dig deep to manage, and I'm sure you're managing the budget, I'm not questioning that, but to minimize, do we have to go for foregone? Is that a necessity, or is that something that all the cities are just trying to go for now because they're permitted to do so because of legislation?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll make one further comment, which is, and I think it's important that you hear from us. We understand what you're saying, and we understand how painful this economy is for all of us, for everyday people. It's been really tough. This is the first budget I literally shed a tear over at one point in frustration. In terms of digging deep, I feel like we've done that. The important thing to, I think, recognize is that the foregone revenue is for the specific purpose of paying for the firefighters. I appreciated that we spelled that out for people. If we didn't take foregone revenue this year, we would not be building any source of ongoing revenue to pay for those salaries when they come onto our books. So it's a tough situation. But I wanted to just chat with you back and forth a little bit. And the hardest thing, I think, for homeowners is the lack of visibility into what's going to happen with your property value from an assessment standpoint. That can become a huge source of frustration with no visibility as to whether it's going to go up, is it going to go down? In this interest rate environment, residential home values are going down overall, but that doesn't mean that's going to be the case for every individual home. So I don't know. I just wanted to have a dialogue. So I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you caring, and I appreciate you coming to talk to us. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, did we have anybody else who signed up to testify?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and present testimony on the public hearing related to the foregone for fiscal year FY25? If you're online, you can use the raise your hand function. Seeing no one else coming forward. Council, I don't know if you want to talk before someone makes a motion or have a motion and then have conversation.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I feel like between this meeting and our budget workshops, we've talked about it a lot. I'm open to hearing more comments from anybody. I will, take accountability. In the past, I had voted against foregone. I never imagined being in a position where we would have to take it. I always felt confident that our fund balance was large enough to cover us, but I don't feel that way about these 18 firefighters. And I think it's important. It's an important priority for the city. It was a decision that we've made. I think we need to support it. It is an incredibly difficult decision, but I think it is the right decision for the city. I move that we approve the collection of foregone revenue associated with the fiscal year 2025 budget in the amount of $504,546.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to approve the request for foregone. Is there discussion? Well, I'll
Mr. Mayor.
start go ahead, Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the good comments from Vice President Strader. And I once worked with somebody and they said, there's a lot of different roads to Vegas. And I think that's where we're at right now, is that different council members have different approaches on how they think that we can address the SAFER grant long term. I don't believe that now we need to use foregone able to accomplish that. Between our fund balance and forthcoming new revenue sources, I think that we're in a strong position that we don't have to make this decision today. And so I'll be voting against the motion for foregone. I don't think that it is needed at this particular time.
Any additional comments? If I could, just for a moment, in a lot of ways, I take responsibility for where we are today, in the context of, it was ultimately my decision, working along with council, but accepted the SAFER grant and identifying a way to try to bring forward a way to help pay for this long term. And that's what this really is. And I'm going to borrow something that Councilmember Whitlock said to me when we were doing interviews for him coming in to take his position as council member. And, policy drives budget. That really struck me in that comment. Sorry if you were going to use that comment later in your comments. But this is really this is a policy decision, and Councilman Taylor alluded to this as well in his comments, that this is a decision about whether or not to increase the level of service to our community. That's what this is. We currently have firefighters on all of our fire engines, and they run. The additional firefighters, that'll allow them to do stuff that they can't do when they show up at the very first time in some situations. So it is about an enhanced level of service to our community. And I think that's, from my perspective, when I propose foregone for helping pay for that enhanced level of service, is because if you look back over the last, as Councilman Strader pointed out, the amounts that we've requested over the last 4 years, we haven't taken the full 3% the last several years, despite what we've seen happen in our economy. We found ways to make it happen. And I would like to have said that, but for a few rather large bills that we received from the state of Idaho related to Percy, which was over $700,000, we may not have requested foregone. I can't say whether we would or wouldn't have, because there's still unmet needs in our police department. I know that they would have loved to have brought more of the positions that are necessary in their mind to achieve their mission. Several of our other departments did not. We had to say, yeah, this is not the time for those positions either. Those were the hard conversations we had as a leadership team on the executive side of the conversation in developing a budget that we felt could still move the ball forward for a growing community, as well as a way to fund enhanced level of service that actually is going to have a lot of ancillary benefits that I hope the chief and I are able to share with the community in the coming month or so. But it'd be premature to state that because I don't want to get the community's hopes too high. But they do have some good value to the community and our homeowners and our business owners in ways that hopefully they'll see that in different areas. So that's why when we put together this budget, we did assign these new positions into the foregone revenue. As was mentioned, we'll have to look and see where things go over the next 2 years as we see what the changes are, the impacts to sales tax, and a lot of impacts that will help us drive that. And are we able to achieve our goals through regular processes, or is foregone going to be a regular part, or are there other ways? We are hopeful for additional revenue, and Terry, I'm sorry, it is federal revenue that we're hoping for from the state that will filter its way down to the communities, but it's a way to help pay for this in the future. But as of right now, that's not materializing, and we don't know if or when it will, and if it will be enough to cover these costs. So we are looking under every rock we have. We're looking, on every horizon that we see for the opportunity. But it is a way to try to deliver the services to the community that they first and foremost expect. And also hopefully they'll be able to achieve a greater result with the additional firefighters that this foregone is being directed towards long-term. So I know it's been a big conversation for all of us. We've all had many conversations through this process about what it means and how we would do it. But as executive branch leader of the city, I felt this was the only prudent way that we could work towards achieving a goal without just saying, well, maybe next year we hope the funds will be there from another source. And if we didn't take steps now, then it may be too late. And we wouldn't have even the option to consider if we want to keep those firefighters or not in 3 years when the grant runs out. So I appreciate everybody, not just on this issue, but on the base budget. It's been a fascinating 6 months of dialogue and conversation. And I think ultimately our community is going to be in a better place because of it. And thank you. I don't have a great ending. Thank you in that context.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
since you gave my speech, I had to come up with another one off the top of my head. And I guess my speech is probably to thank Terry and Rick for being here and providing your comments. This is not easy, and I sense the frustration, I sense the emotion, and we feel it too. And I will be voting for this, but I want to commit to you and to anybody else that's listening in on our meeting, and to my fellow members on the city council, that we will be vigilant. We'll be watching your tax dollars very, very carefully. We'll be spending them with the utmost care and concern for the safety of this community and providing the services that you expect, and keeping as much of that in your pocket as we possibly can. I'll be vigilant, and I want you to know that your testimony tonight, your thoughts and feelings have had a strong impact on the newest member of this city council. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I move to vacate my previous motion.
Second agree? Second agrees.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I neglected to close the public hearing, so I move that we close the public hearing.
There's on the motion to vacate, is there any opposition from council? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is vacated. Have a new motion to close the public hearing on the foregone. Is there any discussion? Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion to close. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those nay. The ayes have it. Councilwoman Schrader.
Mr. Mayor, my apologies for goofing up that one step. I move that we approve the collection of foregone revenue associated with fiscal year 2025's budget in the amount of $504,546.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there continued discussion on this topic? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Councilman Cavanaugh, you're muted.
Sorry, no.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor,
No.
Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
4 ayes, 2 nays, and the item to approve the collection of foregone revenue is approved. Council, do we need to take a break, or are we good to keep moving?
Mr. Mayor, if we could take 5, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:15.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm gonna show you how easy. Not a tutorial, just a brief thing. Right here. I'll give you that today. Just turn them on here and send sound out. So it's a 2-minute process. Yep. Yeah, just come in, maybe email me that day. Mhm. Yeah. Time for whatever. Easy. Of course, we'll see you then.
there one or two? Oh, I thought there was two. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Chris.
All right, council, we will go ahead and come back from our recess. And the next item up is a public hearing for proposed FY25 water sewer rate increase schedule. Turn this over to Director McVeigh.
All right, thanks, Mayor and members of the council. So this is our public hearing for our FY25 rate increase. So just as a reminder, we presented to you and then we published in the utility bills for a month, also in the newspaper for 2 weeks. We did not receive any public comment in Public Works. But just a couple of things, just a reminder, this is actually will be a net decrease on the residence bill, even though we're asking for a 3% increase because the EPA fee is coming off. So the average customer will see a decrease of about $1.90 per month. And even with our 3% increase, we continue to be some of the lowest rates in the valley. And this increase is needed to maintain the solvency of the enterprise fund over the 5-year period. So happy to stand for any questions and complete the public hearing.
All right, thank you. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
not so much a question for Lorelei, but just maybe a comment. I sat down with Lorelei probably a couple months ago and we looked at some of the rate increases, and she showed me the long-term projections in different scenarios. And I want to put this on the record. I think the city of Meridian's in really good shape when it comes to our infrastructure with water and wastewater. It's big, it's expensive, but it's critically important what we provide. Very happy to see we're going to have a small decrease. I think that's a recognition, though, too, that a lot of some of the costs we have to pass along are imposed upon the city from the EPA through DEQ. And I think it's good that we have some level of regulation in order to preserve high quality, clean water. Sometimes it might be a little bit onerous, a little bit overboard, actually quite a bit overboard. But I just want to commend the Public Works Department and all the staff. They do a really good job. But I think this it makes a lot of sense what we're doing tonight to support this. And I just want to make those comments here as the liaison with Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Councilman Taylor. Okay. All right. Ms. Clerk, do we have anybody sign up on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody present who'd like to provide testimony in this public hearing, either in person or online? If you're online, you can use the raise your hand function. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed. The next item up is resolution number 24-2466, a resolution adopting the FY 25 water sewer rate increase schedule, authorizing the Public Works Department to collect such fees and providing an effective date. I need to ask the clerk to read the motion, read the resolution. Mr. Neri? Ask the clerk to read the resolution by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2025 water sewer rate increase schedule, authorizing the Public Works Department to collect such fees and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this resolution read by title. Does everybody like to read it in entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
I move that we approve resolution number 24-2466, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2025 water and sewer rate increase schedule.
Second.
I have a motion and a second approving resolution number 24-2466. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Thank you, ROI, to you and your team, and we'll see you again soon. Next item up is, well, first, Mr. Neri, can we open up item 6 and 7 together? Any reason why?
You can do both, yes.
Okay, next, we'll open up the public hearing for Brundage Estates TECC 2024-002 and Brundage Estates MDAH 2024-0031. And we'll open these public hearings with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I will be presenting these separately, but I can do them back to back if you would like.
Yes.
The first application before you, item number 6, is a preliminary plat time extension. This site consists of 136.63 acres of land. It's zoned R4 and is located at 3770 South Linder Road. This property was annexed back in 2014 and a preliminary plat was approved in 2016. 2 previous time extensions have been approved on the preliminary plat. The comprehensive plan land use designation on this is low-density residential and medium-density residential. The applicant is requesting a 2-year time extension on the preliminary plat in order to obtain the city engineer's signature on the first phase final plat. The preliminary plat entitles the property to develop with 366 building lots, 20 common lots, and 1 other lot on 136 acres of land in the R4 district. The reason for delay in moving forward with this development in the past is that the developer had been focused on development of the adjacent Biltmore Estates and Oakwood and Gray Cliff Estates subdivisions. There were no new conditions of approval placed on the development with the previous time extensions, as the project was determined to be in compliance with UDC standards in effect at that time, including open space and site amenity standards. The delay since the last time extension is due to improvements to Harris Street to the east being completed with Stapleton subdivision and the city of Meridian extending sewer south in Linder Road from Fall Creek subdivision. Since that time, Stapleton subdivision has been partially constructed and construction of surrounding developments have necessitated some design changes to match adjacent improvements. The applicant is currently in the design process of phases 1 and 2 of Brundage Estates. Completed plans are anticipated to be submitted to agencies for review in September of this year. Construction of the subdivision improvements is planned for November or December of this year, with paving in the spring of summer of 2025. When the preliminary plat was approved, a step down in density was approved with the southern portion of the property from medium to low density residential to match that on the northern portion of the property. The proposed development will provide larger lot sizes, on average 10,193 square foot lots, which is, like I mentioned, larger lot sizes than is typical these days, with an overall gross density of 2.68 units per acre. The development includes private open space areas with playgrounds, picnic shelter, and pathways. A 10-foot wide multi-use pathway and landscaping is planned through the Williams Pipeline easement corridor, and an 8-acre city park is planned within the development. Services are available at the site for extension with development. Development of this subdivision will allow Harris Street, a mid-mile collector, to be extended from the east boundary through the site to Linda Road in accord with ACHD's master street map. Approval of the subject time extension will allow the applicant to move forward with development as entitled without having to go back through the preliminary plat process again, and will extend the time in which to obtain the city engineer's signature on the first phase final plat to July 26th, 2026. Staff is recommending approval of the requested 2-year time extension with the following conditions. 10-foot wide sidewalks are constructed along South Linda Road and West Harris Street, and internal local and collector streets shall align with stub streets to this property. No written testimony has been submitted on this application. The applicant is here tonight. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to come forward and present on this item?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Would you like me to go ahead with the second one?
It's however you guys want to proceed. Is it easier for you for her to do both and you to do one?
Okay, sorry about
Okay.
that. Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So, yeah, item number 7 is a development agreement modification for the same subdivision. So again, like I was saying earlier, this property was annexed back in 2014. It was annexed with the Victory South annexation, which was a Category B annexation of approximately 310 acres of land by the city of Meridian. A preliminary plat was later approved as shown in 2016. And again, 2 previous time extensions have been approved on the preliminary plat, and one is requested before you tonight. When this property was annexed, one of the provisions of the Declaration of Consent to Annexation was that the property owner may not develop or receive development approval until such time as the property owners and the city execute a development agreement. With this application, the applicant proposes a new development agreement for Brundage Estates as required with annexation of the property. As noted, a preliminary plat was previously approved for the property, as well as subsequent time extensions, and the applicant is nearing submittal of a final plat application, which constitutes development and the necessity of executing a development agreement for the property. The preliminary plat entitles the property to develop with 366 building lots, 20 common lots, and 1 other lot on 136 acres of land in the R4 district. Staff recommends the proposed development agreement include provisions for future development of this property to be consistent with the approved preliminary plat, landscape plan, and conceptual park master plan, as well as conditions associated with the concurrent time extension. Conceptual building elevations were approved for future homes within the development with the preliminary plat application as shown. These elevations incorporate a variety of field and accent materials, including stucco, a large number of windows and glazing, and lap, board and batten, and shake siding with stone accents and architectural elements consisting of corbels to emphasize roof gables, masonry, stone columns at the entries, trim around windows, etc. A variety of color changes are incorporated as well for interest and accents. Because the developer of this subdivision is different from the original developer, alternate elevations are proposed to be included in the new development agreement as shown. The proposed elevations lack the variety in materials, colors, and architectural details and elements shared with the community, supported by City Council, and memorialized in the original approvals. Many of these many of these elevations do not meet the minimum baseline standards in the Architectural Standards Manual pertaining to building form, architectural elements, and materials, as noted in the staff report. Staff discussed these concerns with the applicant prior to application, advised the applicant to heighten the design of their elevations. However, the developer preferred to stay with their established product type. Although single-family residential detached dwellings are not typically required to comply with the design standards in the Architectural Standards Manual, instead receiving higher level review typical with annexations and preliminary plats, the Unified Development Code does allow compliance to be required with a development agreement. Previous concepts proposed with the preliminary plat were in closer conformance to these standards. Therefore, compliance with these standards was not required. Staff finds the existing elevations to be of a higher quality of design in terms of baseline standards in building form, architectural elements, materials, and colors. Therefore, staff is not in support of the proposed modification without changes to the elevation to comply with the design standards as noted in the report. Staff recommends the applicant make revisions to the elevations to comply prior to the council council taking action on this application. Revised elevations have not been submitted prior to the hearing tonight as requested. Further, and which is typical of developments along major roadways because the rear and or sides of homes facing South Linder Road, West Harris Street, and South Oakbriar Way will be highly visible. A provision in the development agreement that requires these elevations to incorporate articulation through changes in 2 or more of the following. Modulation, for example, projections, recesses, step backs, pop outs, bays, banding, porches, and balconies, material types, or other integrated architectural elements to break up monotonous wall planes and roof lines. Single-story homes are exempt from this requirement. Staff is recommending the project is either continued to a later date in order for the applicant to make revisions to the elevations to comply with the minimum design standards in the Architectural Standards Manual, or the portion of the development agreement request pertaining to changing the concept elevations is denied. No written testimony was received on this application. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
because we're kind of, I guess, maybe talking about these both, I guess, I just a quick question on the plat time extension. When is it set to expire?
Let me look at my staff report just a moment.
I'm sorry, Sonia, I'm kind of multitasking with using my computer to prop up my iPad, so I'm kind of looking at my phone and I wasn't able to find it, so apologies for the question.
Yeah, that's all right. Just a moment. July 26th of this year. The applicant submitted their request for extension prior to that date.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sonia. Actually, Mr. Mayor, just one other just quick follow-up then. If the DA is continued, would staff then recommend a decision on the plat to be continued as well?
Mr. Mayor, council, no. I think council should move ahead with the time extension decision tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Council, any additional questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strayer.
It always helps me to have an example. So if we took maybe an example of like the modern farmhouse one here that's like in the top right-hand side, what changes to that elevation would, if it's possible for you to sort of walk us through an example of like, what changes would you expect to see to make that elevation acceptable?
Mr. Mayor, council, there's a lot of different ways that folks can go, meet the design standards. I mean, some examples would be adding some design elements in the peaks, corbels, decorative vents. That elevation right there is pretty plain. I would recommend adding some stone accents along the base of the structure.
Thanks.
Color variations, material variations, that elevation's quite plain all the way around. So really anything would help. Those are just some examples.
Okay.
If you look at the staff report, there's examples in there of straight out of our design manual.
Okay. Thanks, Sonia.
All right, would the applicant like to come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Becky McKay with Engineering Solutions, business address 1029 North Rosario and Meridian. I'm representing the applicants in this, on these applications. As Sonia indicated, there are two applications before you this evening. One is a time extension. I kind of need to give you a little bit of history since there are new members on the council. They may not be aware of how this project, why was it annexed in 2014? Why was it preliminarily platted in 2016? And why are we here in 2024? And you haven't built it. So just bear with me. I'll kind of give you like a little quick history lesson on it. So my client, Lee Centers, owned the subject property, lived on the subject property here. He also owned this property right here called Biltmore Estates. And he owned the property here that's now called Gray Cliff Estates. We had gone to the city to talk to them about the possibility of sewer and water extending to this area. And one of the problems that the city had was existing Kentucky Ridge and existing Meridian Heights were not in the city limits. They were approved under Ada County. Their sewage was accomplished through open lagoons, and they had a community well system which had failed, which had high arsenic levels, which they'd invested money in drilling a new well, which still had arsenic levels. And the problem that the city had is they said, we have a barrier of these county subdivisions that is keeping us from annexing south. At the same time, the city of Cuna was expanding their sewer capacity and obviously looking at this area, well, Meridian, if you can't sewer it because you can't annex it and you can't get your sewer to it, then maybe it should be Cuna. So we worked diligently with your public works director, your city engineer, the council at the time, the planning staff, and we went to Mr. Hansen, who had this piece of property here. He was 94 years old, and all he wanted to do was be left alone with his sheep. And we said, could we convince you to consent to annex your property and allow us to take Meridian sewer and water through your property? We'll design a site plan for your parcel, and you will put it all back for your sheep. And then that point of annexation was here at Bear Creek at Victory Road. This is a little squirrely for me today. So Mr. Hansen said, I will agree to that if you pay the additional taxes that I would pay being annexed. And then we had the issue of Meridian Heights. Their HOA did not have the monies to pay for those Meridian hookup fees. So I spent a year and a half. My client, Lee Centers, paid for that year and a half. And we had workshop after workshop. We finally came to an agreement that their HOA would pay the water hookup fees. That's all they could afford. That is not a wealthy neighborhood. And Mr. Centers would pay the $750,000 for all their sewer hookup fees. And then they would consent to the annexation into the city and elimination of their ponds, elimination of their community water system, and they would connect to your system and they would pay your rates. It took us a little over a year and a half to come to that point. Hardest thing I ever did in the city of Meridian, but it was well worth it. And we were granted an award by the city, Mr. Centers and myself and those other individuals that worked to solve this problem. So that's where that 2014 annexation, that Category B annexation took place. So at the time, we didn't have any site plans or anything. So they annexed approximately 310 acres. And basically what that allowed is the city of Meridian to get past those county subdivisions, get into this midsection, and that has since allowed your sewer and your water to continue south and your annexation pathways to keep moving south as planned in your area of city impact and your comprehensive plan. So we were annexed in 2014. And then in 2016, we brought forth a preliminary plat on the project called Brundage Estates. Oop. I know, I always have these issues. There we go. So the plat that's before you was done in 2016. We had stub streets, we had the Harris Collector. We had, we were all R4. All lots met the minimum 8,000 square feet. We had detached walks, 8-foot buffers. We had about a 10,193 square foot average lot size, and our density was 2.68 dwelling units per acre. And the city thought, you know, for this area, that's appropriate. We had 366 single-family lots. We had private open space, we had playgrounds, picnic shelters, pathways. Then we also had the Williams pipeline that ran through the project. And there we go. It's touchy tonight, I'm sorry. And so we had a multi-use pathway that we needed to construct along that Williams pipeline. The other thing on the comprehensive plan was it showed that a neighborhood park should be built in the middle of this section. And so with Biltmore, with Gray Cliff, and then with Brundage, we allocated, Mr. Centers allocated property for an 8+ acre neighborhood park that would serve this whole section. The other issue was the Meridian, the South Meridian Transportation Plan. It was proposed that Harris Street would be improved to a collector status from Highway 69 all the way to Linder. And so we planned within this project extension of Harris all the way to Linder. So, you know, one of the things the council looks at when they're looking at these time extensions, you know, one, does this project meet the UDC, current UDC? Because 2016, the standards were different. The answer is yes. We meet the open space requirements. We meet the amenity requirements. We comply with the comprehensive plan land use map, the South Meridian Transportation Plan, and the Meridian Parks and Pathway Plan. So everything that was designed in here has basically satisfied the test of time, which is rare. A lot of times these projects over a few years, then they don't meet your standards. So as we started getting into the design of the project, we were stopped. And one of the things that stopped us is my client at the time, his wife became terminally ill. And her illness lasted a few years. And we were told that we should just hold off and request a time extension. And that's what we did. She has since passed away. And now Mr. Centers is selling the project to Toll Brothers. They want to buy the entire project and build a fabulous community. So we started working on our design. We looked at our timeline and we needed a time extension because we've got, you know, like a month or two left on our design of phase 1 and 2. And one of the things that we realized, and I just want to bring it to the council's attention, is we set the Stub Street locations, but as the projects developed around us, they didn't match them. So that's this kind of ugly little drawing that I have here in yellow. This Stub Street moved about 235 feet. This Stub Street moved over about 32 feet. So I did have to make some adjustments to match these stub streets because they're already in and I don't have a choice. So I made some minor adjustments to those. The other thing we found out is the collector, another engineer did this collector roadway and he dropped it south. One benefit was it obviously made a larger, more usable area for the neighborhood park. The disadvantage was we had to make some changes here. Then Ada County Highway District has changed their standards on collector to local street intersections. At the time we did this plat, they required only a 220-foot offset along a collector. They now require 330. So we did come in and we basically eliminated some of those intersections with the collector. We now meet all ACHD standards. We matched all the stub streets to the north. We did not increase the number of lots. I did have to adjust my entrance, my northerly entrance off of Linder, because we had it coming in at a Y, and they don't allow that radius any longer coming off of an arterial. So I had to make a few modifications. We've increased our open space. Toll Brothers had me take all these lots out here. And in addition to the amenities that were originally proposed with the project, they will be building a clubhouse and pool facility in addition to all the other amenities that we initially proposed. The multi-use pathways, the playgrounds, the pocket parks, the benches, the linear open space. The Harris Street, we got that curve worked out because we couldn't make that curve work based on where this was. And now all of that meets ACHD standards. So I did want council to see that I did have to make some minor changes, but it was due to comply with ACHD and to meet the stub street locations from my other adjoining projects. We're currently working on phase 1 right here and phase 2 at this location here. There's a copy, or that's kind of the original neighborhood park layout that we had. It was a continuous connection of the multi-use pathway that runs along the Williams Pipeline. The Williams Pipeline is being upgraded right now to urban standards. Originally, it was a rural standard, and now to meet federal guidelines, it's all being upgraded to an urban standard. There are 2 pipelines there. When they got in there, they realized that the pipelines were not where they thought they were. So the other thing that I had to adjust was the pipeline easement moved 20 feet. So now we are centered on those pipes. We have our 75-foot easement. I can plant shrubs. I can do the multi-use pathway. I can do turf, and I can do shrubs, but I can't do trees. As far as the neighborhood park, we did take that before the Parks Commission. After receiving approval from City Council, the Parks Commission said that they were supportive of a neighborhood park in this location. Mr. Centers did agree that he would install the irrigation and seed to green it up when we get over to this area for the city. And it would be a donation to the city. And Toll Brothers are aware of those commitments that were made to the Parks Commission at the time and are willing to obviously abide by the previous commitments. When we submitted the preliminary plat, since we did not have a development agreement, the elevations were tied to our pre-plat. At the time, Mr. Center's son was going to build all the homes in the subdivision, and he built a lot of homes in the Biltmore subdivision. And then his youngest son decided he didn't want to be a builder anymore. And I think that's what kind of prompted Mr. Centers to rethink Brundage, because it was quite a large project. So the elevations I submitted with the preliminary plat were custom type homes. They were primarily craftsman style, single story, 2-story, a mixture. I didn't have a lot of elevations, but they were of very high quality. Toll Brothers, they're more of a production builder. So the elevations that we've submitted obviously reflect, if I could just finish here, Mr. Mayor, please. Obviously, one of the things that's changed since 2016 is styles. farmhouse styles are in, modern styles are in. And so Toll has a whole new line of homes, and they gave me these elevations. We took them to the staff, and the staff said, you know, we don't have problems with the farmhouse. We don't have problems with the modern elevations. We just want you to dress them up a little bit to obviously meet the standards in which the project was initially approved for. Their design team was completely tied up with a project in Caldwell, and they could not update these. And I had to submit the DA mod when I submitted the time extension, obviously, so that I could present both of them to the council. In my letter to council, we stated that we are in agreement to upgrade those elevations that I've submitted, send them to staff so Bill and Sonia can review them and approve them so that they meet their expectations. And I guess I'd like the council to approve the time extension this evening, approve the development agreement. But Sonia can't bring that development agreement to you guys for your approval until she gets the new elevations and the staff has approved them. So there is a mechanism to keep me from moving forward. And I can't submit my construction plans or my final plat until the development agreement is signed and approved by the city council. So we do have a mechanism to make sure that the staff gets what they think they need on this particular project. Toll Brothers does a beautiful project. They've got their landscape architects working on the designs for the frontage and the signage and the clubhouse. And then I just wanted to bring some elevations. This is that Windrow subdivision that's just to the south of us. Those are 5,000 square foot homes. And we have 9,500 square foot or 5,000 square foot lots. We have 9,500 square foot lots next to them. You know, these are just pretty pictures that don't necessarily match what is constructed. Obviously what we're bringing is exactly what we're going to build. And I guess please provide me the opportunity to get through this evening. And like I said, approve the time extension. We keep moving on our plans and then work with the staff, bringing forth those modified elevations. And then once they're satisfied, like I said, they'll come forward as part of that development agreement as those exhibits. Thank you. Can I answer any questions? Sorry I took so long.
Thank you, Becky, for the informative history lesson for some council as well as information. Councilwoman Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, Becky, so much could happen in a decade. That was an amazing history. I appreciate so many moving parts, and I just want to compliment you personally for working through the issues in Meridian Heights subdivision and some of the surrounding areas because it improved our whole city by doing that. You helped to solve a very difficult, intractable problem. My only question was feedback about the 10-foot wide sidewalks on South Linder and Harris, if you were in agreement on that recommendation from staff.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader, yes, we are. In fact, we agreed to that at the pre-application conference, and it is part of our Linder and Harris design. So we did widen out our landscape buffers along the collector. I didn't have to widen out my arterial buffer because it was already exceeded what the minimum was. But we will have 10-foot on both sides of Harris and a 10-foot along Linder, along with our 10-foot multi-use pathway all along the Williams pipeline.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Becky, thank you for reminding me about history. I remember very well when Kentucky Ridge and they were failing and we were jumping in trying to find a solution.
It was a tough nut to crack, but we all did it.
It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't a group effort.
Yes.
Our police department and code enforcement team was a major, major force in that whole process, trying to figure out from our side of the city what had to be done. But it was nice to hear the backstory of what Lee Centers did as well to make it happen.
Yep, and Mr. Neri, he played a great part in it too. Thank him for everything, and Mayor DeWeerd we kept the group together when there were times we thought it was gonna fall apart.
So just to further follow up on your path forward, as I understand it, if I'm correct, path forward is to approve the time extension this evening
Yes,
and not, are we just going to delay the modification, Sonia?
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff is amenable to the applicant's request to work with staff to submit elevations. The only issue with that is you guys wouldn't see the revised elevations, but you know, you don't normally. So as long as they don't have any issues with complying with the minimum design standards and the architectural standards manual and aren't requesting any waivers or anything from city council or any design exceptions, staff is amenable to that request.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it would have to come back before city council.
and those elevations will be an exhibit in that development agreement that will come before the city council. So you will be able to, yes, see the work that my clients have, the progress they made.
Any additional questions, council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Becky, appreciate it. This one has kind of been fun for me. I'm appreciating that I've been able to channel the spirit of the late great Keith Bird, who could recall with vivid clarity applications 10 years previous. I remember this was one of the very first applications I saw when I was brand new on the council. And so I don't necessarily have questions about what you're proposing, but more to get some feedback from you about time extension requests. And in my time doing this, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think time extension requests, multiples of them, are in the best interest of our community, because what happens is our public has a perception about what is and isn't occurring. And I certainly saw this early on in council. Past time extensions had been granted by previous councils. They then get approved alongside with annexations, and our community feels like a big chunk of residential pops up overnight. And so as somebody who's been in this industry for a long time, and has probably forgotten more about land use than all of us will ever learn, what is the appropriate amount of time extension request that a city council should grant?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, that's a good question, and I think all councils struggle with that. I think when the recession hit, obviously, all the rules went out the window as far as time extensions, and I think my record was Spur Wing Patio Homes, which had 5 time extensions. So this one is not 2-5. I think the key thing to look at is, does the current preliminary plat still meet the intent as far as density, lot sizes, open space, amenities, current standards? And the answer to that would be yes. So in this particular instance, it's hard to put a hard, fast rule on a time extension. I believe the last time I brought this project through for the time extension, Councilman Cavanagh, you indicated that you didn't have a problem with the time extension because of the density.
The density, I remember this
The
conversation.
density being at 2.68, you thought was appropriate for the area. So that's why you were supportive of the time extension. You know, there may be other projects that are of significantly higher density that transportation issues may change over time. There may not be capacity for them. Obviously, this particular project is helping alleviate the situation by doing the collector extension from where Harris ends to the west and over to Linder. So everything, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. I don't know if the council should say you get 2 time extensions and that's it, no more. Each project should be able to stand on its own. And some projects, you probably shouldn't do a time extension on if they're no longer the appropriate type development for a particular area.
Yeah.
Due to transportation changes, due to comp plan land use map changes, or sewer capacity, water capacity. This particular project has sewer and water at its front door. We are in that sewer shed. We've already done a lot out there to facilitate this. We've extended the fiber optic from Amity to Victory to accommodate a future signal at Harris. We've also, participated in rebuilding Harris, widening it. So is Stapleton. And I'm working with ITD, pushing for that light.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Caver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Becky, I want you to know, I agree with everything that you have said. And while I certainly agree that each application for a time extension request needs to be heard on its own merits, there is also a certain level of consistency that I think our city council has had. And so that I hope this is not a gotcha question. This is really me trying to kind of learn from you all about what is the appropriate. And one of the pieces I think that you didn't take into account that I think that at least that where I'm coming from, and that's where this question is coming from, is perspective from our community and what they view is and isn't, smart growth or appropriate growth or thoughtful growth. And when they see, a bunch of housing projects kind of pop up that have been planned for almost a decade, if not over a decade, pop up overnight. And again, I'm a South Side guy, but I moved to South Meridian after this annexation was heard. And so trying to find the right balance of what our neighbors are seeing or experiencing, I think is also important. So I appreciate your feedback. I'm supportive largely of the time extension request tonight, with the hope that, just being upfront, I don't know I would be supportive with a future time extension request for this project in the future.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Cavanagh, I will not be back for another time extension. Once we get these construction plans submitted, then we will bring in successive phases within the guidelines under the UDC.
Thank you.
This project just had a slow start.
Yep, I get it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing. Ms. Clerk, we have anyone sign up to provide testimony?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Hey, is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony on this item? Or if you're online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand, would the applicant like to make any final closing comments or see if council has any comments before they make final comments? Okay, so applicant has waived any final comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton,
seeing as there's no more public comments, I move we close the public hearing.
or both items? Or both items?
For both items, yes.
Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing for item 6 and item 7. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
split these into two motions. The first motion on the first one, after approving all staff applicant public testimony, I move to approve file number TEC-2024-002.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 6. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Strater,
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. Item is agreed to.
Mr. Mayor, before taking action on the second one, just to make sure we're clear with staff, would the correct motion on the second one be to suggest a continuance?
Mr. Mayor, council, that is in your purview. That's one of your choices you could do. The applicant requested that they be able to work with staff rather than a continuance, and they would submit revised elevations to myself, and I would review them for compliance with the design standards and the architectural standards manual. Once they are deemed in compliance with those standards, they would be included in the development agreement, which would go before you for approval prior to recordation. Staff is okay with that option.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
make a motion that we take no action on the second project and we
We want to take action if you want staff to follow, to do what Sonia said, you'll need to make a motion to approve with, I don't know if it's technically a condition. Is it a condition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move that we assign the applicant to work with staff for follow-up on
Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry.
on H-2024-0031, development agreement modification.
Does your motion include to approve that, why they work with staff?
Yes.
Do I have a second that agrees? Does it need to be restated in a different way?
Can you just restate it? What I heard was we would approve file number H2024-0031, but require city staff to approve the elevation as submitted by the applicant. And assuming that, yeah, that's what I understood. And I'm supportive of that motion. So if that's the motion, I'd be willing to offer my second to that.
I approve that motion is better than the one I actually stated.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
I don't mean to keep us going on this. It's been a late night, but I guess maybe a question for our legal staff is, couldn't the development agreement be continued to a date certain to once staff have approved the elevations, and then it could be scheduled for a future council action?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think that's really the question, Councilman Cavanagh. If the council wants to review what the staff has going to approve, yes, you would then continue it. If the comfort level on what has been requested by the applicant was that they meet the staff requirements and meet the requirements of the design standards, and the staff, as long as the staff approves them, you will then get back the development agreement with the modification for approval, but it wouldn't be for another hearing. So you will still get the development agreement back, but it'll already have been reviewed, and the attachments of the new drawings and the new elevations will be included, but there wouldn't be another hearing for it.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
if I'll just make a comment, I think kind of to what you're sort of suggesting, Luke, and what was said earlier, I'm not sure that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that council necessarily would just make an action to approve an elevation. Usually that's part of a larger application. What we're saying is, like, I think we have a certain level of confidence that they'll comply with what the city staff is suggesting. And if they don't, they wouldn't be in compliance with the what we're suggesting here. So I'm comfortable with moving ahead with approving it, knowing that they're going to get the requisite approval from staff. If they don't submit appropriate level elevations, I don't think that it would be moving forward as I am understanding it.
Correct, the development it would never come back to council if they never get to a point where staff is in compliant or it's in compliance with staff.
Yeah, and it
direction.
seems like the applicant, as I understood it, was okay with that approach, that they were just, because of circumstances and timing, weren't able to get those updated elevations to staff in time for tonight.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, just a quick response.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Taylor. I appreciate you kind of sharing some of your perspective. I think that's in line with what the applicant offered. And being just upfront, I'm not going to support the motion. And it's not because I'm against what the applicant is trying to achieve. I do think there is a certain level of subjectivity that comes from us as elected officials. Elevations, I think, is one that we often consider in an application. I have full faith that the applicant's going to bring forth what is appropriate, and certainly believe that staff will make sure that this community's best interest. But because this is an area of subjectivity that council sometimes has an opportunity to weigh in on, and was, I believe, discussed through the past public hearings about this particular application, I think it's just best that we would continue it to a date certain so that council has an opportunity to review as well.
Is there further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, maybe just to provide some comments helpful for future applications as well. I think it's important to have a level of consistency and a little bit of lenience when granting time extensions to make sure that business owners in our community have an expectation of consistency from us. And I am open to, in this case, it's been several time extensions, but for the reason that the applicant is meeting all of our current requirements as a city, that goes a long way for me in being supportive of a time extension. You know, the elevations, you all know I'm such a control freak. But given that city council doesn't always review the elevations, you know, prior to approval in this situation, I am comfortable because there's no waiver being requested. There's no request of any deviation from the standards. That makes me feel more confident in our staff's ability to direct an appropriate development agreement that will come out with elevations that are, you know, meeting our standards. So that's where I fall on this one.
Is there any further comments? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
No.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strainer.
Aye.
Whitlock.
5 ayes, 1 nay, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll move on to item 8. Mr. Neri, do we want to open the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, no, we would just continue it for our
Okay.
agenda to the next date.
All right. Then council, do I have a motion to continue?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I move that we continue item 8, Timber Creek Recycling, H 2024-0032 to September 17th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue item 8 to September 17th, 2024. Do I have any discussion? If not,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, if I recall correctly from our agenda this evening, this is being continued because of a noticing issue. I assume we are, or the applicant or the city, somebody is curing this noticing issue. Does it require reposting? Was this a mistake on the applicant's part, and do we need to direct them to pay for re-noticing? Just catch me up to speed on that real quick before an action is taken.
My understanding is this was not deemed to be, it was deemed to be a higher intensity, and so it needed to be extended from a 500-foot noticing requirement to a 1,000-foot noticing requirement. So I believe this was our need to make that change, not the applicant. So there was deficiency in not notifying enough people in the area or per our numbers based upon the type of application that it was.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I guess a quick follow-up. So we're going to notice people within 1,000 instead of 500. Will the folks that were noticed within 500 about tonight, will they be re-noticed for the 1,000? Or
Yes,
because
they
we're, okay. And then is that an expense then that the city is going to be taking on since this was our error?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is continued. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Or a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
no future meeting topics. I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Good night.
Luke, do you want to stay on here or do you want me to call from my phone for a new one?
Yeah, whatever you want to do is fine by me.
Okay. I'll call you a new meeting, or actually